There are moments in life that quietly reshape everything. Moments when, no matter how consistently you show up, no matter how much care and presence you offer, the other person simply looks past you. They grow so accustomed to your existence that they start treating you like a guaranteed outcome, something permanent, something that requires no effort, no recognition. They underestimate what you bring. And no matter how overlooked you feel, they seem convinced you will remain there indefinitely, waiting in the background. This is one of the deepest wounds a person can carry, not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself, it accumulates. Today, we are going to explore 10 specific behaviors rooted in the unshakable philosophy of the Stoics and the depth psychology of Carl Jung that may, over time, awaken something very particular in the person who once took you for granted. We're talking about a creeping fear of loss, a disorienting sense of losing control, and the kind of quiet regret that tends to arrive only after something irreplaceable is already gone. But before we go further, I want to be completely honest with you. What you are about to explore is not a revenge playbook. It is not manipulation. This is about reclaiming authorship over your own life, rebuilding your sense of dignity, and doing what Jung called the work of individuation, becoming so fully yourself that no one's indifference can define you anymore. If you are still watching this, you are already part of the rare few who are willing to face what most people spend their entire lives running from. 97% of people scroll past content like this, not because it does not reach them, but because it reaches them too deeply. If this is already moving something inside you, subscribe to Jung Psychology Hub right now and turn on notifications. What you are about to hear does not just explain what to do when someone undervalues you. It will permanently change how you see yourself. Let's begin with behavior number 10. Very few behaviors carry the kind of weight that deliberate, conscious silence does. When someone treats you carelessly, when they dismiss your presence, when they behave as though your feelings are inconvenient background noise, they are usually expecting a reaction. They anticipate that you'll defend yourself, ask them why, maybe reach out one more time searching for acknowledgement. But when you meet that treatment with silence, something quietly remarkable tends to happen. The other person loses their grip on the story. In Stoic philosophy, silence is not submission, it is mastery. Epictetus observed that it is nearly impossible for someone to learn what they believe they already know. When you choose silence in the face of being diminished, you communicate something words rarely could. I do not align myself with this energy, and I am capable of moving forward without your approval. This connects directly to Jung's concept of the shadow. When you fall quiet, you remove yourself from the other person's field of reaction, and they are left alone with their own unexamined interior. Not answering messages that carry no real weight. Not rushing to explain your absence to someone who never noticed your presence. Not feeding conversations that only exist when the other person finds them convenient. All of this signals, without a single word, that your inner peace is worth more to you than their patterns. The person who always assumed you'd be there starts to feel an unease they can't name. Questions surface unexpectedly. Why didn't they respond? Why have they gone quiet? Have they moved on? These questions gnaw at the ego of someone who received your time and affection for free. Silence becomes a mirror, and not everyone has the courage to look into it clearly. Strategic silence is not about manipulating distance. It's about protecting yourself, and in doing so, you tend to become more compelling, not less. Behavior number 9. One of the most common emotional traps is the exhausting attempt to convince others of your own worth, offering excessive explanations, justifying every choice, defending every step as though you are on trial for simply being who you are. Ancient wisdom is unambiguous. Your energy should not be poured into someone who has already decided not to see you clearly. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if change is possible, make it. If not, accept it. But above all, do not wear yourself down in the process. When you stop performing your value for someone who was never really watching, you send a message that lands harder than any argument. I do not require your validation. Someone who has grown accustomed to seeing you as eager and accommodating will suddenly find themselves disoriented. What changed? Why aren't they trying anymore? And the thing is, none of this needs to be aggressive. It only needs to be steady. If someone criticizes you without basis, you don't have to enter the debate. A calm response, or sometimes no response at all, and you continue. If someone second guesses your choices, you don't need to persuade them. There are moments when a lack of reaction stings far more than the most articulate rebuttal. People who don't value you often count on a particular vulnerability. They expect you to get defensive, to apologize unnecessarily, to shrink yourself. But the moment you stop offering that, the moment you demonstrate you no longer need their gaze to feel whole, something shifts. Sometimes they even feel rejected without you having said a harsh word, simply because your equanimity speaks louder than any confrontation. You are not here to prove yourself. You are here to live with wholeness. And there is a deep truth embedded in that posture that is worth sitting with. Most people never reach the point where they genuinely stop seeking the approval of those who have withheld it. They keep adjusting, keep softening, keep finding new angles of approach. But when you decide, truly decide, that your completeness is not up for negotiation, something in the dynamic becomes permanently altered. You stop being a problem they can manage. You become something they simply cannot understand. And that incomprehension over time has a way of turning into something that feels very much like regret. Behavior number 8. There are few things that unsettle someone who undervalued you more than watching you flourish without them. When you genuinely redirect your energy toward your own goals, your own projects, your own becoming, you send a quiet but unmistakable signal. I am enough on my own. Jung called this the process of individuation, finding your own center so that you no longer orbit around the expectations of others. What you can control is your time, your energy, and the direction of your attention. Pouring those resources into someone who has shown they don't appreciate them is a form of self-betrayal. Instead, invest inward, read more widely, pay attention to your health, build new skills, demonstrate to yourself, not to anyone else, that life continues to be worth living even in the absence of someone who never fully saw you. This is where the other person's discomfort tends to begin. They realize something that shifts the dynamic entirely. You're not just stepping back, you're rising. While they were relegating you to the background, you were quietly placing yourself at the center of your own story. And watching someone grow, without drama, without announcements, is one of the most disorienting things for a person who assumed they held influence over you. Living with clear purpose also tends to function as a natural shield against toxic relational patterns. When you are genuinely aligned with something that matters to you, peace of mind becomes the priority, and anyone who consistently pulls you downward tends to fall away on their own. The most effective response to being underestimated may simply be personal evolution. And when you begin to bloom without needing anyone's permission, those who once overlooked you may desperately want to re-enter your world. But by then, that particular door may no longer open from the outside. There is something else worth understanding here. Purpose is not just a strategy. It is a form of psychological protection. When you are deeply engaged in building something meaningful, the opinions and indifference of those who never truly saw you begin to lose their gravitational pull. You stop measuring your days by whether they noticed, whether they reached out, whether they finally acknowledged your worth. Your internal reference point shifts entirely. And that shift, quiet, gradual, but ultimately profound, is often more unsettling to the person who undervalued you than any direct confrontation could ever be. Behavior number 7. One of the most quietly revolutionary things you may ever do is learn to say no. No to those who only appear when they need something. No to those who expect your availability while offering nothing in return. No to those who disregard your emotional reality and still count on you to be there. This is not merely a communication skill. It is an act of disciplined self-governance, choosing to be moved by reason and self-respect rather than by fear of disappointment or the compulsion to please. People who don't value you often rely on your difficulty with limits. They have grown used to the open door. They have built their entire expectations around your endless patience and your unwillingness to disappoint. But when you begin drawing lines that are clear and non-negotiable, reality shifts. And for them, that shift can feel genuinely unsettling. Marcus Aurelius returned to this repeatedly. The mind has sovereignty over itself, not over external events. Setting boundaries is precisely that, focusing on what you actually have authority over, your choices, your presence, your time, and protecting those things with intention. When someone invades your emotional space through rudeness or indifference, you don't owe them a debate. You withdraw. When they try to make you feel guilty for prioritizing your own peace, you remain steady. When they want your attention without offering anything meaningful in exchange, you step back. This approach tends to disarm those who have managed you through emotional manipulation, because suddenly the manipulation no longer works. Guilt no longer paralyzes you. You are free in a way they didn't anticipate. Boundaries, honestly understood, are how you teach people what treatment you are willing to accept. And if they are unwilling to learn, they are in the process of losing the privilege of your closeness. That is not cruelty. That is simply the natural consequence of their own choices finally catching up with them. Behavior number 6. This may be one of the most disorienting behaviors for someone who once undervalued you, and perhaps the most dignified. You continue to be polite, composed, and civil, but you no longer grant them access to your inner world. The emotional doors are quietly, firmly closed. The message underneath the courtesy is clear. I have grown, and there is no longer a place for you here. Ancient teachings consistently counsel against reactivity and bitterness. Anger and the desire for revenge bind us to the very thing we are trying to leave behind. What the Stoics advocated instead was virtue and self-mastery. Responding to someone who once looked down at you with genuine composure, while maintaining the distance your peace requires, is perhaps the most telling demonstration of character available to you. They were typically expecting one of two reactions. Either you would come reaching toward them, or you would lash out. But when you offer a calm acknowledgement, no resentment, no intimacy, and simply continue on your way, it leaves them entirely off balance. It's as though you are quietly saying, I carry no hatred for you, but you no longer have access to me. Over time, they realize they haven't simply lost your physical company. They've lost your warmth, your trust, your care. And that particular quality of distant kindness works on a person from the inside in a way open hostility never quite could. If this exploration of Carl Jung's depth psychology is beginning to resonate with something real in you, Jung Psychology Hub exists specifically for moments like this. Every week we go deeper into identity, into the unconscious patterns that shape our relationships, into the kind of psychological insight that actually changes how you live. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss it. Behavior number 5. One of the most common tools used by those who undervalue you is poorly founded criticism. Often, people find it difficult to confront you directly. So instead, they subtly attempt to erode your confidence, pointing toward flaws that are invented or exaggerated, hoping to destabilize you. What they may not anticipate is this. Once you have genuinely internalized these principles, that kind of criticism tends to lose most of its power. Epictetus was precise. It is not events themselves that disturb us, but the interpretations we place on them. When you remain grounded in the face of criticism, you begin to understand that the problem doesn't originate inside you. It originates in the person making it. As Jung observed, what irritates us about others can reveal something about ourselves. In this case, their criticism is often a projection of their own interior conflicts, dressed as commentary about you. When you choose not to react, it is not because you are indifferent. It is because you have learned to experience words as what they actually are, just words. You reclaim control of your own interior state. The moment someone who has been dismissing you realizes that nothing they say can disturb your equilibrium, the dynamic begins to fracture. They find themselves asking, why isn't there a reaction? That question, left unanswered, tends to send them into a quiet spiral of helplessness. Real freedom may be found precisely here, in the discipline of your own response. And in that steadiness, you grow not only protected from external criticism, but genuinely more whole. Behavior number 4. Your dignity does not depend on who is present to witness it. When someone has undervalued you, the most tempting traps are to lower yourself in search of their sympathy, or to remain visibly wounded so they might finally see your pain. But wisdom has always pointed in a different direction, toward honoring yourself even in solitude. Seneca wrote that a person tends to discover their truest greatness in aloneness. Preserving your sense of self in the face of humiliation or erasure is a form of emotional self-sufficiency. Your value comes from your character and your conduct, not from the applause of anyone standing nearby. When you can stand tall in your own private moments, when no one is observing and there is no audience, you radiate a kind of quiet authority. This is what Jung described as inner wholeness, and it tends to be tested most severely in those solitary moments. When the person who dismissed you senses this, and they often do, it unsettles them. How are they still moving forward? How are they this grounded without needing anything from me? That interior solidity is something no one can take from you. What they eventually realize they've lost was not just someone who cared for them. They lost proximity to someone genuinely authentic, whose dignity required nothing from them to remain intact. Behavior number 3. People who have undervalued you will often expect, almost as a formality, that before you step away, you will warn them. Explain your reasons. Offer a final chance. But real inner strength tends to emerge from something quieter, the capacity to move in a new direction without needing to present justifications to anyone. One of the most fundamental truths of human experience is impermanence. Nothing is fixed forever, relationships included. If someone has consistently withheld the respect you deserve, they have already moved away from you emotionally. Perhaps what you genuinely need is to recognize that the distance is already real, and the most honest thing you can do is stop pretending otherwise. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment or feeling obligated to explain yourself, consider this. If the other person has not been willing to value what you offer, acknowledge the expiration and allow yourself to continue forward, without fanfare, without conflict, without glancing back. And when you allow the connection to dissolve, without seeking their permission, you demonstrate something quietly extraordinary, that their approval is not a prerequisite for your contentment. That realization alone tends to produce a psychological disruption in the other person. The quietness of the departure can be far more impactful than any dramatic exit. Behavior number 2. When someone in your life consistently withholds acknowledgement, one of the easiest traps is to begin measuring your milestones against their response, waiting to see if this time they'll notice, this time they'll say something. But real, lasting satisfaction tends to come from something much simpler, from knowing you gave what you were capable of giving, regardless of whether anyone else registers it. When you reach something meaningful and quietly choose not to make your celebration contingent on someone else's reaction. You begin to free yourself from a dependency on external approval. This is not arrogance. This is the recognition that your journey has inherent worth, not because someone else validated it, but because it is yours. Those who have undervalued you will often respond to your achievements by ignoring them or minimizing them. They may expect you to feel incomplete without their acknowledgement. But when you behave as though your wins are already enough, as though the accomplishment itself is the reward, you create a quiet power the other person can find no foothold in. As Jung suggested, when you are aligned with your authentic self, the need for masks and performances tends to fall away. Your worth does not hinge on what they think of you. And when they realize you are capable of genuine fulfillment without needing them to participate in it, the space where their influence used to live is simply empty. And that particular emptiness has a way of being surprisingly loud. Behavior number 1. The most quietly powerful stance you can adopt towards someone who has failed to value you is to become genuinely self-sustaining emotionally. This means arriving at a place where your sense of meaning, your feeling of worth, and your experience of being cared for are no longer primarily dependent on another person's approval, attention, or affection. You are already whole. And this interior recognition is one of the most formidable sources of strength available to a human being. Epictetus returned to this idea throughout his life. Real contentment belongs to us, not to the circumstances outside us, not to the people around us. When you have genuinely absorbed this, when it is no longer philosophy and has become something lived, you begin to understand that the only person truly capable of affecting your emotional state in a lasting way is yourself. Others may attempt to destabilize you, but the ability to choose how you respond belongs entirely to you. When you become emotionally self-sufficient, you tend to develop a natural resistance to diminishment and indifference. The person who hasn't valued you begins to notice that their tactics no longer produce results. The words that once landed with weight seem to dissipate before they reach you. The withdrawal of warmth that once would have sent you searching now passes without sending you into motion. You are already complete. It's worth saying clearly, emotional self-sufficiency is not isolation. It is not closing yourself off from connection or warmth. It is the capacity to offer yourself the care, the respect, and the recognition you might otherwise have been searching for in the wrong places. You are no longer organizing your life around the expectations or evaluations of others. You are moving according to your own values, your own standards, your own internal compass. When that shift becomes visible, and it does become visible, the dynamic changes in ways that can feel almost irreversible. They can no longer use your hunger for their approval as a lever. And the realization that they've lost that influence, that the window through which they once entered your emotional life has quietly closed, tends to be one of the most confronting things they experience. In the end, you don't simply grow stronger. You become a living demonstration of what it looks like to build a life on emotional independence and self-respect. And others around you will begin to recognize in you something steady, something rare, a model of confidence rooted not in performance, but in genuine interior wholeness, which often is precisely what those who undervalued you feared most. These are the 10 behaviors drawn from centuries of Stoic wisdom and the deep currents of Jungian psychology that may gradually reinforce your position in the face of those who have chosen not to see your value. Before you go, I want to ask you something I genuinely love to see in the comments. In Jungian psychology, the number 10 carries symbolic weight. It represents completeness, the return to wholeness after a full cycle of experience. If any of these behaviors resonated with something you've been quietly carrying, leave the number 10 in the comments right now. Or write the number of the single behavior you find hardest to actually practice in real life. The patterns in those responses tell us something genuinely interesting about where we collectively are in this work, and we read every one. If what we explored today touched something real in you, Jung's Psychology Hub is where that exploration continues. Every week, going deeper into the psychological frameworks that can fundamentally reshape how you move through your relationships and your life. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and don't miss the video on screen right now. There's something in there worth carrying with you. Until next time.